Hello, Hockey World. It's Monday, October 29th, 2018.
Hi, I'm Michael Agello on location.
I'm Peter Tessier in Winnipeg.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I am Eklund, and you're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday. This time to fill you in the comings and goings in the hockey world. And we talked a little bit about this last week, but sports gambling, which is something that, I personally on HockeyBuzz tried to avoid advertising forever because I just thought, the NHL had that appearance of, it could be wrong type thing.
Well, that's over with.
That's over, yeah. They're okay with it, to the tune of $700 million.
Well, no, that's not what they're getting.
Explain, Russ.
All right, so it looks like they're getting around $200 million. That's what Elliot Friedman just reported, but even he's not sure in what drips and drabs and how they're getting it. The $700 million is what MGM is putting into the program, the area, the surrounding hotels that they have. They own 10 properties, but here's the thing. So the biggest misnomer or misleader in this thing is it's not an exclusive deal, right?
Right.
But if you think about it, it's really an exclusive deal for at least 2, 3, 4 years, and I'll tell you why. Because they own 10 properties, and they own in Detroit, they own in New Jersey, they own the Regatta in New Jersey as an example. They own one in Massachusetts. So until these states pass these laws, Vegas and New Jersey are really the only places you could gamble in other than on the app through those states. So that really isn't exclusive until states start changing their minds. And until there's a state that doesn't have an MGM property, it is still kind of an exclusive if you think about it.
Yeah, but the thing is, Russ, is that with the Supreme Court decision that allowed this to happen in New Jersey, it's going to happen pretty quickly in these other states. So there'll be some.
Who knows? Justice.
There'll be some pushback, but I think that the ability to generate revenue, and politicians, if they can make a buck out of anything, they'll do it.
Yeah, but all these things are years away. I mean, these things take a lot of time. New Jersey can happen quickly because you already have so much in place, and the gambling things
Christie spearheaded that. If he didn't spearhead that, it wouldn't have moved this quick either, to be honest.
Right. So, but if you're just, and there are other casinos obviously around the country, but I think getting sports gambling through at the local level is going to be tricky. And the way he said it, though, even though it's not exclusive and not exclusive, listening to Gary's press conference, he compared it to like the television deal,
right?
Which is like an exclusive national deal,
right?
And, but he says they also allow local affiliates to do some things as well. Well, we all know like that they allow the locals to do some things as long as it doesn't affect what the nationals are doing.
Right. So think about this for a minute. And he was asked the question, hey, what about in this city? And he said, well, if there's no MGM property, but MGM is probably going to keep an eye on who's going to be the next places to get sports gambling and open a property because they have this deal with the NHL. What do you think?
Yeah. No, it behooves everybody, right? I mean, and it's not it's not like, there's anything evil happening here. It's just that this is they're very aggressive. They've always been aggressive with this kind of thing. Yeah. Peter, you're the business guy in this group. What are your thoughts here?
Well, it's interesting because we in Canada, we can already bet on hockey.
Right.
It's just you have to do it through a government gaming platform that it controls. It's all provincially regulated through things like lotteries and stuff. So we already have the ability to gamble on hockey. It's not as diverse a product as going to Vegas. So I think the real question becomes is what's the online play on this? Because if there's going to get any uptick of the four major team sports, then there's going to have to be a way for people in markets that aren't attached to MGM properties to use this and gamble. And I think the idea that this being a major cash cow really quick is going to take some time.
It's all app-based, Peter. Just so
what?
It's all going to be app-based.
Yeah. Okay. So there you go. So here's the thing. So does MGM them have to have a property in this state that where the app is going to, like, where you're gambling from? So if I'm in New Jersey, MGM has to have something in Atlantic City then.
And they do, yeah.
So they have to
Yeah,
attach that.
no,
So if you're in Minnesota, or if you're in Minnesota, you could be SOL if MGM doesn't have
I'm not
property
sure
there.
about to use the Borgata app because they're in New Jersey and it's allowed. That's probably the way around it.
I think you can use the apps wherever you are. I don't think.
Right. So if it's so strictly, the NHL will allow for gambling through MGM anywhere you want
Through their app, yeah.
through their app.
What you have to do, though, there is a workaround. I noticed a friend of mine was trying to gamble a couple of weeks ago when we went to a football game, and he couldn't do it with his New York bank account. So you're going to have to open like a PayPal or something.
Yeah.
You know, and get around it that way.
Set of rules. I was talking with a group a while ago that were trying to get into this, and they were talking to me about some things, and so I learned a lot about the different. Every state has its very specific things like that, like the bank stuff and the different things like that, and it's going to be tricky. And there were moments when the press conference was awkward, you know, for a Bettman press conference. Did you get that at all? Like,
yeah, a little bit.
And I think it's awkward because, you know, like immediately, the guy, the MGM guy who's there, says, you know, well, Gary came to us immediately and said, you know, he's really worried about, you know, that this didn't affect the integrity of the game at all. You know, because that's obviously the first thing people go to with gambling.
Right.
It's the integrity. You know, it's going to be the shoeless Joe Jackson. You know, it's going to be that's what's going to happen, right? But and then Gary quickly responded and says, no, and he actually stopped him. He said, no, actually, to make it clear, you know, we've never been worried about the integrity of the game with gambling. We think the integrity of the game is solid for good reason. We're worried about the integrity of how it's gambled on, essentially saying we were worried about the integrity of you.
Yeah.
And that was interesting. It was a little.
That was a little awkward. But MGM took it with stride. Like they went back and said, "Hey, you've got high character players." The other couple things, though, there were a couple of other interesting things. Gary Bettman has no interest in changing the injury reports. Matter of fact, he not only threw cold water on it. He crumpled it up and he threw it in the trash. Now that doesn't mean a team can't do their own injury report, because that's what will end up happening is like you know, when you're talking about Austin Matthews' injury, if the team wants to divulge what it is, they can, but the league is not going to do anything differently for injury report for gamblers or anybody else.
That's what they're
right,
saying.
But the thing is, and I've noticed this already this season, because the question came up early in the year on Babcock was asked about, you know, he's not using upper lower body anymore, like with Matthews, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes. They were specific. I mean, it was obviously, you saw the replay on Saturday night, you knew it was his left shoulder, but they came out and said it was his left shoulder. So I think without saying it, they're going to be a little more specific. Maybe not, you know, like they'll say broken arm instead of a broken broken leg instead of broken fibula or tibula or whatever. But I think there'll be a little more.
Did that anything to do with gambling, though? I can't imagine Babcock saying anything had anything to do with this.
Well, no, I'm not saying it did. There was a question regarding Joel Quenneville early in the year regarding being more specific about injuries, and they tied it to the upcoming situation regarding gambling.
Well, he just basically threw cold water on that and said he's not making any changes.
Right, but the thing is, I haven't noticed them saying lower upper body. They were specific. So I think they said they weren't going to change, but maybe they are changing.
I don't think so. I mean, where is the league? The league isn't doing that. The team is doing that.
Right, but the team.
The question is, will the league make the team? Like, has the NFL made its teams change the injury reports? Right, like that's basically how.
No, you want to know what changed it? It was Bill Parcells being an idiot, and basically, and look, he was a coach of the Jets, so I can still call him an idiot. And that's my team. He was being an idiot by never, ever divulging anything. And other coaches started mimicking that. And that's when they said, okay, you know what? Screw this. We're doing it. But Gary Bettman doesn't feel the same way. Gary Bettman just feels like, no, we want to protect the players. We're not telling you. But what he didn't say is, hey, it's up to the team. If the team tells you, you can't stop them.
Well, let's just say this. I would be surprised if what happened a few years ago, if you remember, Patrick Kane was out most of the second half of the season. He was considered out for the playoffs, at least for the beginning of the playoffs, and he plays in game one. I would think that that's not going to be allowed anymore. That him being out, because that would affect a betting line. Because people, I
don't think that's changing, Mike.
We'll see.
Who cares? Like, it's just, you know what it is? It's like anything else in the world. Buyer beware, better beware. Like,
I would be surprised. I would be honestly pretty surprised.
But why should he help him? He doesn't have to.
If that changed anything.
There's no wiser words spoken on this show than better beware.
Yeah.
That's exactly, it's the God's honest truth, and it's indisputable. If you're going to put money down, you better beware. Like, you can't say it any clearer. And the idea that someone's going to get inside information to affect something, or that you're going to pay a service to keep you up to date on injuries and the NHL's injury reporting stuff. Let's get something right out in the open. If anyone had figured out a way to game the system, they wouldn't be telling you and selling the services. They'd be gaming the system. Right. Period. Dot. The end. It's over. Right. So don't buy into it. Don't think this is going to change anything. It's over. Because if I'd figured it out, I wouldn't be sitting here.
No,
I'd be making bets.
And when you get, college gambling places are like stone cold locks. So I get these guys all the time wanting to be on Hockey Buzz and like being like, I'll give you the lock of the night and stuff like that. Like I get it all the
Stu Finer Sports.
Hey, listen, I went to high school with Stu. I know him. Anyhow,
hockey is a really awful sport to gamble on. Let's just throw that out there right away.
It's true. Here's the other thing, though.
According to my friends who are actual gamblers, I'm a blackjack player at my best.
Well, let me just say this quickly, because the thing that confused me, and I don't gamble on sports at all anymore, other than an occasional fantasy hockey pool. A friend of mine who had a gambling problem back in the day when he was gambling and betting hockey games, it wasn't odds, it was goals.
Yeah.
So well, yeah, I mean, but it's more common just the odds now. That like I don't see a line where it's like Edmonton -2.5.
Oh no, there is actually at the game the other day. Someone pulled up the line with Flyers Islanders that the Islanders were getting a $1.50, and I remarked to that person, I would take the Islanders with a $1.50, and he didn't do it, and he didn't win.
But with the only other thing about this, and then I think we could probably move on, is depending on how much they're making, depending on how much, whether it's this $200 million figure or closer to the $700 million or whatever, it's revenue, it's hockey related revenue from what you said, Russ. And if that's the case, I think it's going to have an effect on the salary cap to the pot. Now, who knows how much? But anything for teams that are looking for space to sign some of the players, anything is a good thing.
Sure. So there's one other thing, and then we can get into the hockey-related revenue. The other thing was that they tried to put a happy face on, which again, I wasn't buying. And I don't know if you bought it. When the guy from MGM says, "Well, only 30% of Vegas is gambling revenue," it's like, just stop, okay? Nobody goes to Vegas if there isn't gambling there. Nobody would go to that town if it was strictly a tourist town. Nobody would do it.
Come on, 70%. Celine Dion, generates 70% all by herself.
Yeah, I mean it has. As far as tourism goes, you're right. It's got if without Vegas tours, it would have like the tourism of like say Columbus, Ohio. It would be like. Right. But people would still go there for certain things. If you were an Ohio State fan, you would go there. But really, it wouldn't be like a destination that's on everybody's map.
No.
But I think a couple other things before we move on from this that were really interesting to me. And one, I think the whole injury reporting thing is interesting because I got the impression, I don't know if I'm wrong, but a couple things I was looking for, like one, the CBA coming up, and how that play. I kept thinking about that. Like if I was there, that's what question I would have asked him. And how does this affect? Because they did say, "Well, have you talked to the NHLPA about this?" And he sort of brushed it off a little bit. Like, yeah, we've definitely talked to them. They want revenue to go up, and we're making this hockey really revenue. So of course,
he just said it would be a split, so the players get it, and he left it at that. He deadpanned it,
which is all it is now, and that makes total sense. But at the same time, are the players going to have any say in that injury reporting thing? Could that be something that gets negotiated? It's possible because
I don't think it's the injury report that will get negotiated. What Elliot Friedman said on Hockey at Noon I think the part that'll get negotiated is the part we've been pushing for years, where soccer you could track whatever goes on on the field via a chip. Well, the players would have to wear that chip, right?
And so here's the thing about that. Like, so what are we going to be gambling?
That's going to be negotiated.
Are we gambling? Is Connor McDavid faster than, you know?
Yeah, no. What you're going to do is get prop bets. We're going to get does Connor McDavid play over 25 minutes a night, plus or minus 10 seconds or something like that?
Both, Mike. You're going to see that
kind of stuff is really scary. Okay, like let's just throw that out for a second. Like the one that let's just throw out a time on ice bet. Okay, because all right, I'll never forget like the Keith Jones story. You know, that regarding this, that's just like was a really he's a as you know, Keith Jones is a funny guy, and he's on Philadelphia radio here in the mornings, which is amazing because he's on hockey late at night, but he still somehow does the morning show from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. But anyway, he tells a story of him having to get a bonus for killing off a certain amount of shorthanded. If the team had a certain shorthanded percentage, it was a team percentage. So if the team's penalty killing percentage was something, he would get another $25,000. It was written into his contract. So it was the final game of the season. He knew that the team had to kill off like 4 of 5 penalties or whatever in order to get this bonus. He knew he had to do that. So it came down to like 5 minutes left, and he admits this. He took a penalty to give them another power play. He said the game didn't matter. The teams were in the playoffs or not in the playoffs. It didn't matter. He took a penalty, got in the penalty box, and figured we'll kill off this penalty and I'll get my bonus. Right. There was only like 35 seconds left in the game, so it doesn't matter if it's a 2-minute penalty or whatever. He's like, I'm going to kill this penalty off. And in order to get on the ice, he pulled somebody off because he personally pulled somebody off the ice, thinking, and the coach thought, that player didn't know the coach didn't pull him. Like somebody was skating by, he's like, he called his name and bam, he was on, thinking that Jones hadn't been told to do that, but he didn't. He just went on and took the penalty. His coach was furious out in the whole 9 yards. And the funny thing about that is, with 5 seconds left, they scored on that power play.
Sure.
So he didn't end up getting any bonus. But when you start talking about time on ice,
no, they'll have prop bets, but they're also going to show you how fast the guy is skating. They're going to show you all that. The other interesting thing is
time on ice thing is controllable completely by that's a human controllable thing. That's a coaching thing.
Yeah, but the other thing that he did talk about is he's going to sell his data, right? So the NHL is going to get their data and they're going to sell it. That's all well and good. Hold on, that's all well and good. But how come when I go to NHL.com, I still have to back out of that and go to ESPN to get like basic team stats because my thing just keeps spinning and spinning? Like, it's a great thing to say. It's a harder thing to do.
The NHL's website it needs some significant webmastering and a different approach.
It's real.
Yeah, it's a real problem.
I've talked to people about the NHL website in depth. The people who do it, the people who are involved around it. It's obviously, and they call me up. They've asked me to test certain things for the website. And the one thing I've noticed about it more than anything else is, and this is a purposeful thing, like when you go to the stats page right now, like if you go to nhl.com/stats, which is hard to sometimes find, it's there all the time. But yeah, if you just do it by that, you can get to it. You get, the leaders in each category and their pictures, right? Get the thing. Where if you tapped us and said, what do you guys want to see? We want to see the grid, right? You want to see the whole thing searchable. Like, I just want to see the top 40 players first by points, and then if I want to change that to time on ice, I want to change that to goals or assists, I can do all that. And then I don't want to have to go into the goals category, the assist category. But they feel like non-hockey fans prefer the way they do it.
Okay, then I think that's a huge mistake, only because, like Peter is saying and I'm saying, I will go in there, I'll hit stats. Sometimes I'll get what you're talking about, and sometimes I get impatient and I go somewhere else and I get it instantly.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're all used to getting stats a certain way, right? And but they think that way is just is kind of like when you just see a page that looks like a big Excel sheet. Yeah. They think that that's off-putting, right?
You know what? Non-hockey fans not going there anyhow.
And I suggested that they have a vintage stat thing that's just like you click on this and we make it an Easter egg or something fun. Like if you click on that, like the Carey Price, helmet in the corner, you'll go right to the page that everybody wants from us, like that we're always trying to get to, that we go to ESPN to get to, because that's the page you want. which goes back to like what you would see in like the hockey news or whatever when you were a kid, just the basic stats, but searchable because it's the internet, right? So yeah, that's something.
I'll just give you my quick pet peeve, and then we can move on from this. The NHL, I cannot remember the name of the site, but it was a site a few years ago that had the shifts for every player, and they updated it per period, which was great. So you could go back and you could see how many shifts the player played. Well, the NHL, I believe they bought this site, or they brought them into the NHL.com, and they have the shift chart. The problem is that it's not available until the next day. If you go on the site and you click on shift chart, it's completely blank. So, how about like everybody else is real-time stats and real-time info. Let's get into the 21st century, folks.
So here's an interesting thing about that. I went one time and I went and asked the guys in the room at the MTS Center a number of years ago, like, about their data and what they're doing, how they enter it in. I was just really curious because I said there's a lot of things riding on them. Basically, all the guys scraping the live information from Game Center. And they had some really interesting stuff to say about how accurate you have to be, how they go back and change things after the game, different stuff. So when you get something live, Mike, you're getting it warts and all. You're not getting it done. And really interesting thing is I used to sit beside a gentleman who now is part of Roster Resource, and he did tracking for Stats Inc. And his point was, I know for sure, because I've seen a software program, that they're wrong, but we have to be consistent, and we always will end up matching with the NHL's data if there's something there. So the reason you're probably not getting live is they want to make sure it's right. Whether or not that's the right way to do it, it's their product at the end. It's their quality assurance process.
Well, yeah, let's go into like NHL hits. I mean, there's no category that's worsely kept than NHL hits. Like hits.
Sure, no, that's true. But all right, here's the last thing I'll get into because I have a little bit of knowledge of this.
Yeah.
The NHL would like to think that their stats are proprietary, and there is a good case and a good argument to say that that's not necessarily true.
Right. Now what? But I'll tell you. But I know, and
they act as if they are. So
I've been following that. But the problem is this. Okay. Yes, stats are in a way, just in the public domain. They are what happens. The problem is if you're running a site like mine and you want to do stats, which is what So this is they're targeting people like me. Okay. The reason we don't have stats on HockeyBuzz, the reason we don't have scores on HockeyBuzz, is because it would cost us thousands of dollars a month.
Right.
And to do, and we could do it without that. There's a way of doing it without that. That's like, we're called phishing. We're going and taking their things off illegally and stuff like that. But, we're too high of a profile of the site to do that. So we're not going to do that. But then what happens is, so yes, while stats are, and so legally I can go and I can get a stat and I could write the scores on the game. Like we can all write the scores on the game, but that's only useful to a degree. If I want stats like I need for the fantasy game, in that situation, right? Where I want time on ice or whatever, what people would charge me for is giving it to me in a feed that's easy for my programmer to use, right? So that's the issue, like getting it in a way that the programmer can then take the stats in real time and implement it into a program that he uses for, like, say, the fantasy game. So that's what's not proprietary, right? Because that's where they're saying, and that they're right about that. That's where they have me. That's where they have you if you're running a site or whatever. So that's the issue, and there's lots of ways to get around it. But let's move on. Let's move on to Austin Matthews first and foremost, and a lot of topics course this brings up. But we've had so much to go to, so we're going to kind of limit things to like 5 minutes there per topic, so we can get through this all.
Sure,
you guys. And I've been getting a lot of complaints about that too, that we need to limit things, and I agree. All right, so I'm going to put limits on this unnaturally, which I hate to do, including my explanations on limits, which is going to be stopping right now.
And including the 25 minutes we just spent on.
Right, and including that, right? Which
like news. Anyhow,
that was the main story.
Yeah, it's important.
Story gets a little bit
but
better.
No more important than Austin Matthews' shoulder, who's currently saying "ouch" in a private clinic.
Right, and Austin Matthews is out. We know he's out. That's not. I didn't see the hit. Was it anything?
It was a completely clean. It was a clean hit by Jacob Trouba. There was no problem with that, and Matthews came out surprisingly because normally the Leafs don't, and a lot of teams don't do. When a player is injured, they don't make him available to the press, but he was made available today, and it's a minimum of 4, and they said minimum of 4 weeks. He missed 4 weeks last February when he got sandwiched by Pellick and Clutterbuck in a game against the Islanders, and they held him back. Because there was no way they were going to miss the playoffs or anything like that. They were in third place, so there was no reason to rush him. I mean, this, and Russ and I talked about this on our the Off the Post show on the weekend, is the fact that this is the third shoulder injury for Matthews. That's beginning to be a concern. I'm not saying he's injury prone, but he goes to the net with sort of reckless abandon. He's a big guy. He does that. He's got the talent to do that, but it may affect what he can do and what he should do in terms of self-preservation, because all the injuries that he had last year and this year, it was going to the net. He was getting, elbowed in cross-checked in the back. I think the concussion was an elbow from someone, and then 2 hits going to the net. That they cannot have him out for a quarter of the season, and he's going to probably miss about 15 to 20 games this year with the injury.
The natural thing is this? Are we looking at another Eric Lindros type person, like who plays a certain way and is incredible when they play that way, but in order to play for a long time, has to decide I'm either going to play that way and risk getting hurt, or I'm going to manage myself, and which seems almost impossible for hockey players to do.
No. I think it's possible, Like I think they're going to let him play more like Mario Lemieux and less like Gordie Howe. I think that's the answer. Now, we don't know, like Mike said, he had 3 shoulder injuries, and we don't know which one was twice. We weren't really sure. But here's the thing. At this point, he'll strengthen it up for the rest of this season. He's not going to be 100%. And at some point, he's going to get an operation. Now, some players say they're better and they're good forever. Yeah, that's if you're a player that doesn't play high-intensity hockey. I think at this point, this is the warning sign that says, all right, look, there's a million different ways Austin Matthews can score in this game. He should play more like Mario Lemieux. He should.
Yeah, and he said this injury is not going to require surgery. You're probably right, Russ. Whatever one it is, I'll bet you after the season, he has some sort of surgery. And shoulder surgeries are risky. So, it's not like a knee.
But
yeah,
that being said, I mean, the Leafs are going to be a playoff team, right? And don't you really want him to be 100% in the playoffs? I mean,
no
one wants to do unnecessary surgery, but I see so many guys who get surgery in the off season and they're fine.
You can't get it done and play in season. It's too long.
Yeah, you can.
These guys get it done at the end of the playoffs and are back by the regular season. So.
Not shoulder surgery. No.
Well, yeah, you need a minimum, like it's 6 weeks healing from the surgery, and then another 3 months.
Right.
On the very rarest one, and they're not all the same surgery. Right. This says shoulder surgery, but you got to get in. I have a nephew who's had both his shoulders done, and and he was a hockey player. He played AAA hockey up until he was 18, and each time after the surgery, he was down for 4 months before he was doing anything significant. It's serious stuff. So here's the thing about when you talk about Matthews and what he means to the Leafs. This isn't about Matthews being ready for the playoffs. This is as much about the idea that, wait a second, is this a vulnerable point for him in terms of his shoulders? Are these things that he's vulnerable on, just genetically speaking?
Yeah.
Does he have to change a little bit of the way he trains?
Yep.
Do they have to adjust some padding, preparations underneath? And what does he have to do to avoid taking those kinds of hits? That's probably what happens. You're not going to change the way he plays the game. That's ingrained in his head.
I think you can change it.
The way he plays the game has to do with everything, all the things you mentioned before. And all those things, like how he takes hits, how he goes, and those are all part of how he plays.
So the reason why I say that is, one, that could have happened against the glass at the blue line. It could have happened at center ice. It could have happened in front of the net. Could have happened behind the net. Could have happened in the corner. You're not going to changing his game means he has to take away his ability to go into vulnerable positions for that hit. That's all it means. It doesn't mean you don't stop being Austin Matthews. And I think we use an over-encompassing idea of, oh, he's got to change his game. That means he's got to become a different player. You got to be a lot more aware. I just want to clarify something, that when we say change the game, it doesn't mean turn into Tavares. It means you're still Austin Matthews, but you have to be aware of where you're vulnerable.
But it's more than aware. It's more than awareness. Like you have to realize it's just not worth it at times for you to go into a high traffic area. Nobody's pinning Austin Matthews against the glass at the blue line. There's no reason to. The only time they're ever going to hit him is around the net, and he could get around that very easy, and I think he should. Here's the thing that it reminded me of, though. As a Ranger fan and as a hockey fan, it reminded me of Barry Beck, who also was a phenom, and he was really big, and then he would get shoulder injury after shoulder injury, and I think he had to retire by the age of 30. At one point, now look, medicine's better now than it was then, but at one point he took a year and a half off, tried to come back, and still had a shoulder problem. So that's why it's tricky and you don't know.
Well,
Barry Beck was a BC boy, and we said this in our group chat, and when you brought it up, Russ, a friend of mine worked with him a little bit, and we once went out with him, and I didn't know it was Barry Beck. And this enormous man came up, and I was like, and he goes, "You don't know who is Barry? Hi, Barry, blah, blah, blah. Hands like a gorilla's."
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, Mike, who the hell is this guy? He goes, "It's Barry Beck."
Yeah.
I'm like, what? I mean, if that guy was getting tossed around, my goodness. Like, that's what it says.
Well,
and they didn't have the padding they have now. Like,
no, just a couple quick things, because we're going to stick with the 5-minute limit here.
Yep.
He's going to be out a minimum of 4 weeks. I think the Leafs are better prepared for the absence of Matthews this year than they were last year, because now obviously Tavares moves up to the number 1. Kadri's always been a number 2, and he played very well on Saturday to get them that victory. I think they're better suited than last year. And last year they went 11-7-2 without Matthews. Now their power play is going to have to pick up a little bit of slack, but they've got the firepower, and Freddie Anderson's going to have to be a little better. But they'll be able to weather this. It's just a question of whether they can weather another injury, and that's why it's not good for him to rush back. They're going to take their time. It's probably not going to be 4 weeks. It's going to be closer to 6, and if it's 6, it's 20 games. The other thing is, and we'll talk about this tomorrow, because I know you have a drink at, because here comes William Nylander. This will not affect the Leafs' stance on William Nylander at all. They are, they're not going to say, "Oh my God, we got to get Nylander back in there because Matthews is hurt." No. In fact, I think it's this. This probably just in a way stiffens their resolve here. They're not, because now Nylander's camp might think, "Oh boy, we're going to hit the big money now that Matthews is hurt. They're going to be coming to us, and we'll get more money." No, it's not happening. In fact, Kyle Dubas visited 5 cities last week, not 3, 5. Nobody is doing that in late October if there isn't a possibility of a trade. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but there's the possibility.
I think this could speed up the trade so they get the roster spot back rather than caving on the deal. That's what I think.
I mean, I guess the final thing on this is what's been brought up in our chat room, and it's been brought up everywhere, is how does this affect what Matthews is going to get paid? Because I made my statement earlier that I think he deserves McDavid money, and the best argument that anybody had against that was this: that he's going to play, if he's going to be like a 65 game player per year, like if that's what if he's going to average somewhere in that range or whatever, or 70, and not, then he doesn't deserve McDavid money, perhaps.
But here's the thing. I'm going to forget about the ludicrous McDavid argument and just go with straight. Mario Lemieux used to only average 65 games too, and he got paid as well as any top paid player in the game.
Yeah,
there's been a lot of guys that have had that problem. I don't think that's going to really affect it much unless they know it's chronic, and we'll never find that out.
I mean, I don't think it should affect it. Because you're still going to have teams out there that are willing to pay him as much, if they have to match an offer or whatever, it doesn't matter. Like, he's going to, but I think at the end of the day, in the who's better, McDavid or Matthews argument, this does affect it, right?
I said before he wasn't going to make as much as McDavid. I stick with that, and the Leafs really don't have to worry, because the one franchise, if he gets hurt, God forbid, he gets placed on long-term injury, and $12 million is a drop in the bucket for MLS and E. So, I mean, they want him to be healthy. They want him to be the franchise guy. But the organization, could withstand it monetarily if he's on a long-term injury. But in terms of the success of the franchise, they want him on the ice healthy as much as possible.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. So in terms of and moving on, I wanted to talk briefly about my article today because I thought it was kind of interesting. Not that I always want to pat myself on the back or anything like that, but I was going through 3 teams that we all that were kind of getting dissed a lot at the beginning of the season in predictions, and realized quickly that those 3 teams were the 3 teams as a child that I thought were the greatest 3 teams ever to play the sport. And those being like the Montreal Canadiens, the Winnipeg Jets. I'm sorry, not the Winnipeg Jets. Apologize. The Montreal Canadiens, the New York Islanders, and the Edmonton Oilers, who over the course of 12 years were the only teams to win Stanley Cups, each winning 4 in a row. And that was my prime, like from age 8 for me on up. So age 10 to 22, those are the only Stanley Cup winners we had. So a lot of people are too young to remember that era out there who are watching this. But those 3 teams were incredible, and they've been less than incredible for quite a while. And all 3 of them have had few issues. I mean, like the Islanders have only been in the playoffs a couple times. The Oilers had a good run in 2004, but that was really like out of nowhere. The Canadiens won a Stanley Cup in '93, and I remember '93 very specifically, like the whole thing that the Canadiens have won a Stanley Cup in every decade. They have at least in that ended in the 2000s, and could very easily not win again in another decade. So you could be 25, 28, 30 years before the Canadiens win a cup again.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yet right now, those 3 teams, and it's early. We always like to say it's early, but at some point we have to say we're 10 games in. Okay, 10 games is usually a mark. They usually say, okay, at 10 games, these teams coaches tend to have this 10-game rule or whatever. They break it up into 10-game segments. If you were to take the numbers of these 3 teams last year in their first 10 games, they were combined 10, 17, and 3, and had a goal differential of -31. So this is the Oilers, Canadiens, and Islanders. This year they're 17, 9, and 4 with a goal differential of +11. Obviously the Canadiens, huge jump from being 2-7-1 to being 6-2-2. The Oilers going from 3-6-1 to 6-3-1. And the Islanders actually surprisingly both seasons were 5-4-1. But if you remember, the Islanders were actually a story last October. They were good, and if you go through the next. They won the next 3 games after this, so they actually were 8-4-1 last year, the Islanders, and they were 4th in the conference at Halloween. All right, so they were were very, very good. And so last year in the first 10 games, the Islanders were 33 goals for, 33 goals against. This year they're 30 goals for, so they have dropped with the loss of Tavares by 3 goals, but have given up 25, so they've given up 8 less. I think that all 3 of these teams are interesting in different ways to watch. I watched the Islanders a little bit this weekend. They won 2 games this weekend against 2 struggling. Well, Carolina is struggling a little bit right now, but
Philly against the
Philly's in dreadful shape. But yeah, and
there's a differentiation between interesting and for real. Are they interesting? Sure. Are they for real? Hell no. It's not even 10 games into the season. I mean, right now
they would do just as well as they did last year for the first 10 games of the year. I don't think anybody would have agreed with me. I think
who had a top 5 record in the second half of the regular season last year? The Arizona friggin' Coyotes.
Right, but they were playing nothing, and they weren't playing after the loss of the loss of John Tavares and having to prove themselves. They went out and they got 2 really good defensive-minded management people. You bring in Lou Lamoriello, who put together the Devils dynasty that basically killed hockey for about 20 years in excitement, but they were just completely defensive. And then you bring in, the guy who got Alex Ovechkin to play some defense and win a Stanley Cup, right? You bring in 2 really good defensive-minded players, that's why they're down 8 games. I mean, they're down 8 goals, basically a goal a game less they're giving up than last year.
But again, there was a 5-goal differential against the Flyers. Here's the thing. Yeah. I think that helps this argument for them. End of the day, they got 80 points last year. They'll get 83 this year because of Barry Trotz with less personnel, because he plays a good system and he's getting the most juice out of this orange than he can. But that is it.
Well, that's funny. the color combination of blue, orange, and white is equivalent for the Islanders and Oilers. I've always thought about that. So no, but the thing about this to me is if
a broken clock is right twice a day.
If you're going to say they're going to get 3 more points, Russ, I think that's like a change in what you were saying earlier in the year.
It's still not a playoff team.
No, but that's significant. I mean, we were talking about a team that could be in the Jack Hughes sweepstakes versus like a team that is actually a bubble playoff team.
I said a team that'll be above the Rangers in their division, and they still will be above the Rangers in their division. They'll just have a couple more points. That's all.
And if they're on a pace for say 83 points, like Russ is saying, they're going to trade Jordan Eberle at the deadline. They're going to trade their UFAs. They're not going to be as good down the stretch. And again, this could be. I mean, Thomas Greiss made what? Thomas Greiss made like 50 saves yesterday against Carolina. Robin Leonard has actually been the good. The Dr. Jekyll of Robin Leonard instead of the Mr. Hyde. So let's just wait until say Christmas, and when they're 6th in the Metro, then we can reevaluate.
I can't even jump on Edmonton yet, but I'll at least say there's a better chance for Edmonton, obviously.
Well, they are percentage-wise in first place in their division. Let's throw that out there. Just which everybody laughed at me.
If Connor McDavid puts away his blue tights and his red cape, this is a pedestrian team. Their backup goaltender. I don't know if he finally got in there, but they had played Cam Talbot every minute of every game. He will die if he keeps going like that. Come on.
Let's not be so harsh here. Eck, do you feel picked on? Is that the issue here?
Well, I always feel picked on. That's not the issue. I mean, that's like I live in that world. But last year, I appreciate the kindness for a second though, Russ. Last year they were the Oilers scored 22 goals in their first 10 games. So Connor McDavid team was averaging 2.2 goals a game. This year I thought, wow, they're at 29. So they're still under 3 goals a game, which is not good. But the fact is not good for a team like, right now in the NHL. For a team like the Oilers, they should be at least at 3 goals a game. But the fact that they're giving up exactly 3 goals a game right now is still like they're still a -1 right now. Okay. But they're 6-3-1. They're finding ways to win. Last night they played a team that's a very good Chicago team right now. And it was a fun game to watch. It was a really fun game to watch. Because I think the Hawks are definitely for real as well. And that's another team, that we can talk about later. But I think that Peter, any thoughts on this turnaround
with the Islanders?
With all 3 of these teams.
The interesting thing about the Oilers, let's talk about them, was they may have gotten off to a bit of a rough start, but they just ran the gauntlet and played some pretty significant competition.
Yeah.
And 7 of 8 points out of it. I mean, you have to sort of like that it's coming together for them. And as we've said before, as long as McDavid's on the ice, there's a chance that greatness and success happening anytime with that team. If Talbot can just play average goaltending, they have a really good chance of doing something really cool.
Yeah.
But and as for the Islanders, I mean, look, Barry Trotz has proven himself to be able to make meatloaf from dog food with a roster. And, there's no surprise there. They're doing what they need to do. And Trotz is the person who's got it in line. I mean, no disrespect to Doug Waite and everything, but if you're picking a coach and you got to choose between Waite or Trotz, like it's Trotz 12 times out of 10.
Yeah.
And
by the way, Peter, some people's meatloaf does taste like dog food. So
okay, fair enough. But it's not a dog's breakfast anymore in the and teams are weird, right? Like sometimes teams stabilize for no reason at all, and you think they're just going to go down the toilet and it's more of the same and blah blah blah, and then they just stabilize and they get sorted and they just start playing hockey. I think there's a number of fans in Winnipeg who are waiting that to happen, even though the Jets are only a point behind the Predators. It's still, it's still an issue. And they do that. They have to weather storms. You have to weather the opposition. You have to weather your own internal challenges. And the better teams do that and come out ahead.
I actually think the biggest surprise of the three is Montreal. They've only played Price 7 of the 10 games. They've actually played Antti Niemi 3 times, which is not the usual backup starter breakdown when it comes to Carey Price, and they've done it completely without Shea Weber. But you look at their stats, and you've got guys like, it's Domi and Gallagher, and they've got, I think, 6 guys who've scored 7 points or more. That's more than anybody expected out of them because they're not a very good offensive team, but they're trying to, I guess, utilize their speed more, and that's an adjustment with Claude Julien. I think he's, not throwing away the defense first mentality, but he realizes this league is built on speed, and he's having to activate his forwards more. That it may work, but I don't think in the end they have enough firepower to play that type of hockey and win consistently. So again, let's wait a month and see what they have.
Yeah, speed and Carey Price help. I'm going to use my 3 minutes for some breaking news that I just got.
Go ahead.
Next week, right now, this week, Rene Fossel is in Russia because they're having a thing called the Vienna Cup. It's kind of like, a series of games that the KHL stars play against other teams. And Pavel Datsyuk's out there, Igor Shesterkin from the Rangers, Kaprizov, and some other really good players. So while all this was going on, I tried to get the question out to Rene Fossel, hey, what about the next Olympics? And he's actually meeting with Gary Bettman next week in Helsinki to start talking about that.
Wow.
And so that's an interesting thing now, because I think meeting this early is a very good sign that good things will happen. And then the question coming out of Russia, which is a really good one, is will the NHL ever play the KHL? And before everybody says no, the KHL wants to, but the NHL, the word from Russia is that the NHL wants to get a fee for, playing their guys. And I got to tell you, and this will be up to Bill Daly to sort of figure out, and Gary Bettman, but that would be interesting if they decided that there was a time that they can do that, maybe before the season begins, a 3-game series or something. You know what? People would have interest.
I would like to see, both of them are really good topics, but I would like to, just as on the second part first, how you have the World Cup in soccer, obviously, where the countries play against each other, but then you also have the European Championships in soccer, which are really fun, because it's like that's where you get like teams, like a Liverpool will play a team from Marseille, France, or whatever.
Well, that's Champions League.
Champions League it's called. Sorry, that's what it's called. Champions League. I think that's what we need in hockey, like a Champions League for hockey, where you have the NHL, the Swiss league, the German league, Sweden, and the KHL.
I think I love the idea.
Yeah, but
it's complicated because you've got one league that's so much better than all the others, and the talent exists here. I think you could have some good games, but if you took the top, the 6 division winners from last year and had them play with the KHL, the Swedish Elite League, I just don't think it would be much of a contest.
You know what? People aren't showing up and paying money for these games for a contest right now in Vienna either, Peter. They're showing up to see the stars. This would bring out the stars. This would make the players more money. This would make the league more money. Yeah. And like there was a game, the first game of the series was like Slovakia lost like 9-0. I don't think anybody in Slovakia probably cares, because they're cashing a check. It's about
right. But if you're a team owner and you've got to send your team over to play in Slovakia for a game in this weird Champions League thing, and you've in the middle of the season you're going overseas, and all of a sudden Austin Matthews gets his shoulder whacked out there, you're probably losing it. Soccer has a totally different economic model.
That's all. If you're worried about it.
No,
That's what they
There's other questions here.
Then the whole point of sending a team over there for people to see the stars loses its validity, because they want to see Austin Matthews.
Mike, who did the Bruins just send overseas? They didn't send everybody.
Right, they sent an AHL team because the Chinese don't know.
Patrice Bergeron and a few star players, that's enough. I'm telling you, that's all that matters.
Right, but we're talking about a preseason game as opposed to a Champions League where people will want the best product out there. And I think the one thing that what you mentioned that I think it won't happen, at least in terms of any kind of public pronouncement, Gary Bettman is not going to admit any kind of progress toward the 2022 Olympics, because that is a piece in the CBA. The players want to go. The league is saying we don't want to go. It's a chip in the game, and they're not going to admit that.
We know he's going through with it. It doesn't matter. And this is just proof that it's negotiations are pretty much.
Yeah, no, it's good that because it felt very adversarial last time around, and
right.
I think that Bettman is doing the right thing by opening this up early and saying, "Listen, let's pretend for a second. We don't know if this is true, but let's pretend for a second that South Korea was an isolated thing, like that we didn't want to go there specifically, which I really felt like is what it was happening. And I mean, there's owners who don't want to go at all. That's for sure. That's always the case. But the league in general wants to go, and the players want to go. Everybody sees the benefit of it. No one doesn't. No one sees. It's obvious. I mean, the benefit is obvious. I agree with all you're saying about the Champions League. I know that the disparity is so great. It would be the equivalent of like what we see in like women's hockey, right? Like where you'd have like the one team, or in this case you'd have one team. In the KHL would be like the slightly better than the rest of the other teams. But what I think needs to be kept open about it is how these leagues are getting better. Like the Swiss league and the German league are improving. They're not
true.
They're not yet at like at probably even like AHL level, right, Russ? But they're right. Getting there.
No, they're good leagues. There's nothing wrong with the leagues. It's when in comparison to what's, you send the Leafs over to go play there, they're going to crush them.
Yeah,
and that's the bigger problem.
To me, this also is not necessarily a sending over thing as much as it is a.
This is a goodwill. Fans get to see some players thing.
I'm not saying there's anything
tournament like the Champion League. I might be mistaken because I don't follow it that closely, but I don't think it's very organized in terms of like it happens like over the course of. I mean, it does happen over the course of like a month or two, right?
No, it happens all season. Like
all season, it happens all season, so you can actually arrange these games, right?
But here's the other thing that happens, though. Like you got to remember, they don't play, like other teams in those leagues don't play when those teams play too. Like the league, like the league shuts down sort of, and they've got to reschedule things. It's really complicated. I mean, look, I think it's a great idea, and I think there should be something that allows this to happen. The problem is soccer players aren't hockey players, in that yes, they get injured, but this is abuse of the body and stuff. There's different things, and the concentration of hockey talent exists in North America. So you'd probably want, and if you're trying to get the game growing out, you've got to take away from North America to go elsewhere, and that's the bigger problem, right?
And
there's a geographical challenge here.
Right, and there's a Champions League that plays during the summer, because I know that SHL teams and German league teams and Austrian league teams play in it. The problem is we're not going to get back to. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, we had the Soviet Wings and the Red Army team playing NHL teams, and that was exciting. That was great. Yeah. We're never getting back to that. That's the problem, because that unknown of those players and those teams, playing against Tretiak, playing against Valerie Harlamov, you're never going to get that same feeling anymore. So I don't know whether it's worth it.
Like Terrell said, we don't have we don't have the hate with Russia like we did then. That was like, I mean, anybody who watches the movie Miracle, which is watched in our house like at least once a month, my kid's favorite movie, he knows the hate that on there.
Nobody says this has to be played in Russia either. Like these games are being played in Vienna. This could be played in a city that's really never gotten hockey.
Right. Yeah. Right. It could, and you could have some teams fly over here and play over here like that. Right. You don't have to have like everybody traveling there. It's like, I mean, I did enjoy like watching the I think it was the Devils play against the Sharks team from Sweden or whatever it was. That was fun. It was fun to watch an actual NHL team play another play another pro league team in preseason. That wasn't just a country team, an actual team. That was kind of cool. We do need to discuss. We're getting so many people in the chat room talking about this, so I do want to discuss this a little bit. The Flyers for a second. Moving. So the Flyers are on a 11-day 4-game road trip. It started after the Islanders debacle on Saturday. And I wasn't at this game, Russ. Were you at the Flyers Islanders game?
Yeah.
Okay, so to me, it really felt like a pivotal quitting point for the team. It felt like things were just falling apart so quickly. And I was really questioning, will the Flyers actually send Hackstall on the road with this team because there's part of me that's thinking, okay, if you're going to change coaches at some point, isn't this kind of a good time to do it? Because you're going on the road, you can have concentrated practices and stuff like that, and you get away from all distractions. They chose not to. They chose to give him. I think they're giving him this road trip. Is that what it feels like to you?
I don't think they're giving him the whole road trip. I just think because there were plans in place, they said, you know what, we're going to go on the road trip. I think everybody's going with them, Ron Hextall and otherwise. And so I was a little surprised they did it that way. They're doing it that way. And then we'll kind of see what happens. Just for those fans of mine, if you want to catch me on Duck Calls, Josh Brewster's show at 1:30 a.m. on Tuesday after that game. Maybe we'll have the answer then. Sorry, guys.
I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of Josh Brewster too.
I know, but 1:30, I got to go.
That's a great time
Oh
to do
my
it.
goodness.
It's a great time. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, don't you have some other commitment at that time?
I felt as if I wasn't at the game, and I was starting to tell my wife, because we had a big family obligation. I was starting to tell my wife, I'm like, you know what's going to happen? They're going to fire him right after this game. I'm going to have to head down to Philly any minute now because this is going to be a problem. And they didn't. So you don't think he's got the whole trip? You think it could go? I mean,
Bob McKenzie was on TSN 1290 here this morning, and he seemed to think that Hackstall was safe for a bit. And his point was Ron sticks to his plan, and he's got a long-term plan. And it was an interesting comment. If I can find it.
But Bob's never in that building, to be fair. And I know he has sources, but Bob would know that Hextall and Paul Holmgren were huddling up quite a bit during that game and in between games before the game. Like there was a lot of discussion going on with, things of that nature. And I don't know what they're discussing, but obviously they're discussing, right? So team president and the GM. So I'm sure it's not niceties. So I just think it's a little more extreme than that. Here's the three possibilities are, on this trip, Hackstall gets fired or another coach gets fired because they already called up the young players. So I think this is his last chance to show with these other two players because he basically said in the postgame, Vorobiev didn't give him any reason to think he could help him in that game, so he wouldn't play him past like 5 minutes in that game. So now the GM gave him a couple other players. The GM is probably making trade calls, but if the GM can't make a trade, then the next logical thing is going to be somebody on the coaching staff or Dave Hackstall if they keep losing. Or if they just keep playing listless. I mean, in the third period of that game, they tried for 2 minutes, and then a lot of players gave up. If you saw the picture I posted on Instagram of Ivan Provorov, he was fed up with the whole process because he played his off, and I think he felt like other players weren't. Yeah.
All right, we've got to get going, guys. But I do want to go touch base on this Carolina thing real fast here, and
well, let's save it to tomorrow because
we'll tomorrow night. Yeah, it's fine. We'll save it. Yeah. It's fine. Anyway, that's this is all the time we have. I don't know. Okay, a real quick question here. Eck, any shot of Hack could eventually be canned that Alan Vigneault could take over for the Flyers?
No.
Nope.
I don't think so. I think they would go internally.
Or somebody they know.
Somebody they know, probably. I mean, it would be interesting. It would be interesting for sure. It would really be interesting to see how that plays out. But okay. We will talk to you guys soon. Thanks so much again for joining us. Remember to follow everybody on Twitter. And remember that the buzz is just hockey. We will talk to you shortly.